Buckle up your dragon saddles, babies, because we have a vibes and values deep dive ahead of us in this horrific aftermath that is Tumbleton. Rhaenyra is giving Lady Macbeth a run for her money, and quite frankly is really living up to the stereotype of Targaryen madness. She's giving it some validity. She's also killing it with her eye makeup. So, I mean, a win is a win. Listen, this episode came with a myriad of betrayals, a religious patricide, and some child murder. No big deal. But it's feeling pretty bleak for Team Black. We may all be morally exhausted, but I can guarantee you're probably locked in for season 4. So grab Dark Sister, prep for the battle at Tumbleton, and we'll get into it right after this. All right, babes. It's taken me a little bit to get here. I'm sorry. Just to give everybody a quick update before we jump in. I have taken a position hosting another podcast, and I've been trying to balance my schedule out while we figure out all of those moving pieces, because that's a pretty recent thing. But it seems like it's starting to even out. Just letting you know some of the stuff that we have coming up. We're diving into Glow of the Everflame. Chapter 16 through 30 will be out tomorrow. We have a Fast 5 that will be covering Spider-Man, Odyssey, Sterling Point, and like other stuff, tons of other stuff on Sunday. I'll be back on Tuesday to finish Glow of the Everflame. We go into Heat of the Everflame next Friday. We'll be back on a little bit more of a regular schedule at that point. So thank you for being patient with me while I have taken on this new position. Once that show launches, I will give you some awareness of it, though it's an educational podcast, and I don't know if that might be necessarily up everyone's alley that listens to the show. But as I get a little bit deeper into the podcasting world, surely as these projects launch, I will make you aware of them. So once that gets going, I'll let you know. But thank you for being patient with me. I know that my schedule is a little bit off this week. Let us dive right into this episode because there's a lot to cover. I thought this was a really good season finale. I was locked and loaded for the story they were telling. I'm really interested in what they had to say. And I thought it was great. So let's start at King's Landing. We'll, for the most part, be kind of going chronologically through this episode. So we start in King's Landing. I think that the show has done a really good job since season 1 telling us, the audience, that Rhaenyra's gender is this thing that is preventing her from being legitimate in the eyes of everyone else around her. Paired with that is the fact that Rhaenyra has zero diplomacy. She is not somebody who possesses this like diplomatic persona about her. And this is where Jace was a real benefit to her, because Jace really was quite diplomatic and really able to navigate a lot of these deals. It also does not help that Rhaenyra's husband / uncle is also not diplomatic. So, you know, it's hard not to feel bad for Rhaenyra. Listen, we support women's rights and wrongs on this podcast, so it's hard not to feel bad for Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra has been in a position since the time that she was a young child where her father, you know, was looking for a male heir, couldn't get him, right? All of the stuff that has happened before Rhaenyra was officially named heir. And even here in this last episode, you have Corlys saying to Daemon, the great houses won't rally behind Rhaenyra because she's a woman. And so, like, it's hard not to feel bad for Rhaenyra coming into this episode when Girly Pop has been fighting for validity since day freaking 1. And in this world of Westeros, where signs and omens are wielded like weapons, quite frankly, it is so frustrating for a character like Rhaenyra, who is fighting for her birthright, to be challenged by her younger brother, who is now this like Jesus-like figure who's been resurrected from the dead. And even worse is the fact that this advice of proclaiming Aegon dead comes from Alicent, somebody that she loves and trusts, even if she recognizes that they're not playing on the same side anymore, if they ever were at all. And so, by Rhaenyra proclaiming that Aegon is dead, all it has done all season is stoke the fire that is his ego to not only disprove it, not only does he not want to be bested by Rhaenyra, but he doesn't want to be that the story is that he was bested by his brother. And so he has spent this entire season learning and growing, maybe, perhaps, but more prominently, it has kept him in this state of petulance and this real tenacity to prove that wrong, which is why he makes his final stand last week with Sunfire when Sunfire comes back. Had Rhaenyra never listened to Alicent, had she never proclaimed him dead, there would not be this opportunity for it to be this resurrection type of experience. And it's frustrating when we've sat in small council meeting after small council meeting where Rhaenyra, through her paranoia, has been advocating to go and seek these people out, to find Aegon, to find Aemon, to find Vhagar. Like, she has been advocating for this, and people are like, there's other problems. And that is true. There are lots of problems that are unfolding for like the beginning of her reign, but she was not wrong to want to have some clarity about where these pieces on the board are so that she can make the decisions and the moves that she needs to make. Now, because she has taken Alicent's advice, honestly, and it's bitten her in the butt, because here's Sunfire and Aegon, who now all of the small folk are rallying behind. Tough for her. It's hard not to look at Rhaenyra and feel the weight of the pressure that this prophecy, this fight for her birthright, this constant fight over the course of her lifetime about her gender has caused her. And more than anything, this opening scene really reminded me of when they were having the hunt for the stag, the white stag, on Aegon's name day. And the hunting party could not find the white stag. But that stag ended up approaching Rhaenyra, which, by the way, Kristen Cole had witnessed and knew what that meant and still decided to go against Rhaenyra, but whatever. It's like this quiet validation of her divine rule. And she's had this experience of the signs and the omens pointing her towards this fulfillment of her perceived destiny. And yet, even with the most direct blessing of all from Viserys, her reign and her rule and her ability to rule are still questioned and still undermined simply because she's a woman. And it's hard not to feel the weight and the pressure of this on her right now, especially now that Sunfire is alive. It's just adding to the bit of splendor that is this part of what it is to live in Westeros, where the sway of the crowd really does impact the reign and the rule. And now that Sunfire is alive and Aegon was, declared dead, Aegon being back from the dead as this Jesus-like figure, the phoenix having risen from the ashes, it's such fodder for the gossip of the small folk who can say that Aegon is destined to rule, even though he is already ruled and was shit at it. So there's nothing familiar to us here in America about that. But whatever, forging ahead. Rhaenyra then literally curses Viserys. She's like, fucking Viserys. And this is such peak good girl energy. It is truly just a daughter who has wanted to please her parent, and his failure as a father, and quite frankly as a ruler, is the burden that she now has to carry. And I think that there's always this moment of becoming an adult and recognizing how much of your life has been lived for your parents, good, bad, and indifferent. But I remember distinctly being like 21 or 22, and my mentor and friend, Terry, and I were having a conversation about my father, who I was not speaking to at the time. And I said something like, well, that's all of the stuff that I have going on with my dad. And she was like, you're in your 20s now. It's not your dad's fault anymore. You're an adult. Take responsibility for the choices and the decisions that you're making. And I think that, here we have this like woman in Rhaenyra, this ruler in Rhaenyra, who's number one, probably questioning whether or not she actually even wanted this thing. The immense amount of pressure that she probably feels in having this prophecy placed on her shoulders. No one understands the full extent of what this prophecy even means, and that it won't even come to fruition for over a century from now in this universe. That winter is like kind of long in the making here. And yet that incredible amount of pressure that she's feeling because of Viserys and what he has placed on her and the way that he has failed as a father to bring his family together and the way that he failed as a ruler in being too passive. He let his family fall into disarray. And something that he should have repaired long before he passed away in order to ensure that his wishes were fulfilled, that his desires were clear and unattested. And now we have Rhaenyra in this vulnerable position who finally succumbs and is like, Daddy Daemon, you go do what you want. Go fucking burn Tumbleton. She doesn't say that. She actually says the opposite of that. She's like, go door to door and flush them all out, which is never how this was going to go. There was never going to be a fight at Tumbleton in which they breached these walls and there was no dragon warfare at all whatsoever. In this, the story, The Dance of the Dragons. This is still a terrible fucking idea. But where else do we go from here? I don't know that Rhaenyra has ever really come to a place or a conclusion where she feels so secure in herself that she can decide upon her own course of action or destiny. There are all these comms throughout the season where Viserys is being called in as this pillar of perfection almost in the way that he ruled compared to Rhaenyra. She even literally says it, Viserys the peaceful. And when she's trying to compare herself to Viserys, there is this like grand failure because that's her father, right? And she feels that she's letting this person down. And knowing that she wasn't fully what he always wanted or envisioned for himself. She then tries Mysaria's ideology on for size, and she goes out and she feeds the small folk, and then she gets frustrated. She's like, well, where does that get me? Kind of nowhere. So screw you, Mysaria, which we'll talk about Mysaria, don't worry. And then she kind of tries Daemon's ideology on for size in this episode. And we will see, like, there are no winners at the end of these battles, which is the intention that Ryan Condal seems to be coming back to again and again after each and every one of these battles. We started with the Battle of the Gullet where Corlys ended that battle and was like, if this be a victory, like, I never want to see another one again in my life. We have Daemon recognizing in this episode through Dragon Warfare that it's not good. That there's no winners, that there's just losers. Obviously, Kristen Cole had come to that conclusion. And so like we're continuing to come back to these, and in particular, like I've just named 3 men who are battle hungry or war hungry, discovering that the glory of war is actually not so glorious. And I think that there's something like really interesting in that, but this ideology that Daemon has where it's sort of like run them through with your sword first and ask questions later is something that Rhaenyra decides to go with this episode. And we will see that will be unsuccessful for her. But I don't know that she's ever come to this place or conclusion where she's ever been able to really understand herself enough to know what it is that she desires out of her reign and what it is that she desires out of being a monarch and what it is that she desires out of her life. She's probably never even let herself dream of what a life would be like outside of ruling. I always think about this quote from Gilmore Girls because it sits with me, where Rory and Logan are arguing about their different paths of opportunity, and Rory gets frustrated with Logan saying, you have every opportunity available to you because you have money. And he's like, no, because my dad has a lot of money, there's only one door and I'm being pushed through it. It's a really interesting concept, but that is Rhaenyra. She's had one door that she's been pushed through from Viserys, and now other people have held her essentially to that door that she walked through. And I don't necessarily know if this is something she might have chosen for herself, if it wasn't something that was stated to her in this prominence, or if the prophecy wasn't involved. So it's just like a really interesting place to find Rhaenyra, who would honestly probably really benefit from spending some time at Harrenhal. So we adopt Daddy Daemon's ideology in this episode. Terrible idea. Of course, it's at the invocation of Old Valyria, where Daemon literally tells Rhaenyra, lesser gods have no say in what is to come. We are the blood of Old Valyria. You have an absolute power in your grasp. You have only to wield it. So here he is once again in her ear, pushing her towards this tyrannical rule and telling her that brute force is the way to go, and has been saying this since the very beginning. And she finally then gives him permission in this episode to start down this path of, if I can't make them love me, I will make them fear me. And yet still at the end of this, she says, the realm is watching. Do not make a monster of me. So she's, letting him out to kind of do what Daemon does best, which is fight and be an incredible warrior, although he gets his ass fucking handed to him in this episode. But she still has this notion, or this idea, that there is a way to do this in which it's a win-win situation, where she can use brute force. I say that in air quotes. She can use brute force without there being casualties, or without there being consequence, in like a don't make a monster of me. There really is no way to go about dragon warfare and to have this experience at Tumbleton without Rhaenyra coming out with some bad PR at the end of it. And this kind of goes back to what Alicent has said to others, and then what Alicent has said to Rhaenyra. This idea that Rhaenyra will not be able to stay herself and remain true to herself if she is going to be somebody who fights for the crown. What Alicent says earlier, when she's like, Rhaenyra is going to have to do what she's going to have to do, and what Rhaenyra is going to have to do is dire. So Rhaenyra is here trying to hold on to the idea that she can come out of this battle at Tumbleton with the ability to be perceived and liked, but she herself is so compounded with grief and fear and paranoia that it is clouding her sense of self, if she even had a strong enough sense of self to begin with, to know what she would or would not do, or what she is or is not capable of. And that kind of leads us into this fight with Baela. So I think it's interesting because they are both right and wrong in the stretch of this fight, which is true for many fights, right? When we fight with somebody that we love and we care about, or somebody that is close to us or has access to us, there are things that they are going to say that are just like the right trigger points. We know how to hit those trigger points between us and the people that we love. And so Baela kind of knows what to hit on here, and Rhaenyra knows what to hit on too. There are so many layers to this. Number one, the way that Rhaenyra grabs Baela's face and the way that she says, you insolent child, which you're going to come back to that line in a second, is very racially charged. And I was uncomfortable watching this. There is something very racially heightened about this moment, about the blood that runs through your veins, which, by the way, is an odd thing to say to your stepdaughter slash first cousin slash would have been daughter-in-law. There's a lot of different things that Baela is to Rhaenyra. But let's go back to the beginning of the fight. Baela is upset that Rhaenyra will not go to seek out Corlys, and I low-key agreed with Rhaenyra. I was like, Corlys made a choice. Corlys actively chose to step away and abdicate his position. He went to go fight the Triarchy, which no one asked him to do. That was a personal choice that he was making because of the gullet and what he lost in Driftmark. That was a personal choice for him. He actively passed his position to Alan. Okay, glad that Rhaenyra just went along with that one. And Rhaenyra didn't send him on this mission. It's not like she sent him on this mission and then abandoned him the second that things got hard. He actively left, and Rhaenyra, as a ruler, unfortunately, can't think about one man, especially when Sunfire is now pulling a Houdini on us. But Baela is correct in saying that Rhaenyra is using people and is not seeing people beyond the fact that they are dragon riders. She's not humanizing these people. She is seeing them literally as weapons and her property, quite frankly. And that's never going to go over well. That's like something that is distasteful and should put a bad taste in our mouths. What Baela fails to acknowledge is how her grief and Rhaenyra's grief are mixing all up in this, because Baela's grief about the gullet and her shame and her guilt around the gullet is what has driven Baela in this relentless pursuit of Vhagar. And Rhaenyra's comment about her being an insolent child, despite the fact that I think that it was heavily racially charged, and I think that that is the way that Emma Darcy played it, is also a bit truthful in that she flew off to the gullet. I mean, this is also a mother talking to somebody who has not aired out their grievances and their anger and frustration in somebody who deliberately disobeyed her orders, not only as your stepmother, but as your monarch, as your queen, to go fly off with your betrothed and have a war. I mean, that was a choice that Baela made, and that her and Jace made as children who think that they know better than their parents, and directly went against and disobeyed what was laid out before them. There is something insolent about her. And it's almost like when you don't get those resentments out, when you begin to resent somebody to the extent that Rhaenyra, I think, resents Baela for what has happened in the gullet and her part in the loss of Jace. When you don't have an avenue to work out your resentment for somebody, it's like that person can sneeze and you're like, shut the fuck up. You can blow up and get angry and frustrated over the smallest of things. And this moment where Baela's grief and frustration around everything that's happened and her desperation and love that is driving her to advocate for Corlys here is being met, I think, directly with Rhaenyra's grief and the contempt that Rhaenyra has for Baela and her part in the gullet. So I think that there's like a lot happening in this fight, and I think that it's a really interesting one. And I think they're both right and wrong in different ways. But I was incredibly moved by this scene. I just thought it was really, really tough for Rhaenyra to be in a position where people are finally openly showing disdain for her rule and the way that she is approaching things. And that has started already, but it's amplified with Baela here in this really contained way in this fight. Alan then basically backs Rhaenyra up after this fight, which I think this is like interesting because they gave us Baela and Alan hooking up. We haven't seen them together since. We had no conversation between Adam and Alan about what happened, but we had a conversation between Baela and Adam about what happened. And then we have Alan and Baela now sort of like on these opposite sides of how they are experiencing Rhaenyra's rule. And we have Alan going to a really dark place for Rhaenyra in this episode in just a little bit. So Alan confirms what Rhaenyra is saying in that, like, we can't just simply go after Corlys. He's made his choices, and here I am to declare myself the once and future Lord of the Tides, which quite frankly does not fucking make sense. This is like this Arthurian legend, which King Arthur, if you don't know, is the once and future king of Britain. Anyway, I love Arthurian legend. It's probably my favorite mythology. I gobble it up. So this idea of the once and future king, which is Arthur, and the fact that he was once the king and will be the future king is a part of the mythology and the legend, right? Alan has never been the Lord of the Tides. So I don't know why they did that here. This really took me out of the episode. All right, so let us go into Tumbleton. Tumbleton Part 1. I think it is interesting that Darren gets knighted with a speech, and not with the Oath of the Knights. So I think this Oath of the Knights is really on my mind after A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, in which we know through Game of Thrones and through A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms that the Oath of the Knights is, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. And in the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and the innocent. In the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, this is a big deal. It's a big deal to say the oath specifically this way, because it is unclear to us whether Dunk has actually been knighted or not by Sir Arlen Pennytree. And when Raymond Fossaway needs to be knighted ahead of the trial of the seven, Dunk refuses to knight him. And it's unclear to us, the audience, whether that's because he doesn't know the oath, because he's never actually heard it, or whether he's literally thick. They call him stupid throughout the entire show. Whether he simply just like can't recall it. He doesn't want to fuck it up. I don't know. So like we're supposed to feel confused about what has happened, right? Ahead of the trial of the seven in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We also know that a knight can only be sworn in by another knight, which is why this Oath of the Knights is so critical and important, because it's a testament to what you are passing on by knighting somebody else. This is also true for Jaime and Brienne when we get Game of Thrones proper. So Ormond doesn't use the Oath of the Knights. Instead, he says, "Do you, Darren, take me to be your lawfully wedded husband? In true Targaryen nature, let's just get married. That will solve all our problems." No, I'm just kidding. He says, "Will you defend those who cannot defend themselves? Will you protect all the women and children?" Okay, fine. In the name of the mother, right? This, of course, is in stark contrast and the absolute hypocrisy of the fact that Ormond is setting up the defenses as the front line being children. So having Darren swear this oath where you will protect the women and children, when we deliberately see the innocent women and children being slaughtered, murdered, and just completely devastated in this episode. He then says, "Do you swear to obey your captains, your liege lord, aka himself, to fight bravely whenever needed, and to do such other tasks that are laid upon you, however hard or humble or dangerous they may be?" So basically, do you swear to give your oath to me and do whatever the fuck I tell you to do? Like, this isn't the oath of a knight. The oath of a knight is to pledge themselves to the safety and security and integrity of the realm. The oath of a knight is not to pledge full obedience to somebody, particularly for that person to wield you as a weapon, especially when that person is Ormond. So this is just another huge manipulation tactic that Ormond is using in order to keep Darren sort of under his wing. So back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra breaks up with Mysaria through Alinda Mail. She is just like, "Sorry to dine and dash, but it's time for you to go. You've overstayed your welcome." And while she's chit-chatting with Alinda and she's like, "Hey, get Mysaria the fuck out of here," Alinda then tells Rhaenyra that Helaena is on a hunger strike and that her caretakers are nervous because she's pregnant and she's got a baby in there. Helaena is out in the courtyard, and as Mysaria is being forced out, she's like, "Hell hath no fury. Aegon lives. your baby is a hostage. Fuck the Targaryens. Fuck Team Black. But Helaena has already seen the mayor. She's recognizing that this is something that she's witnessed from her dreams and now knows that, the end is near. Helaena gets back to her room. She's realized that she's girl bossing a little too close to the sun. She's posing all of these philosophical questions to Rhaenyra about the quality of life that she's living. And she does what sisters do best and just completely rips Rhaenyra a brand new asshole. She does this much better, I think, than Baela, by the way. She, again, invokes Viserys. She's like, our father would hate what you're doing. Nobody knows how to hit a punch like the people who know you best. Knowing how much Rhaenyra has fought for and lost over the course of many years, Helaena hits the gut punch right there with the Viserys call out. She then talks to her about this beetle. She's like, hey, there's this beetle. It's only available in King's Landing. It eats the waste of other animals. And she's like, it's beautiful. And as anybody does when somebody is engaging with you with their special interest and you have no interest in it, but you are trying to be polite, Rhaenyra's like, sure, you'll have to show me that bug next spring when it comes. And this is where the sister argument hits really hard. Helena's like, nah, I know you're lying to me. I know you don't care about this beetle. Everything that you care about is ugly. And then she's like, and you're ugly. It was giving sisters. It was giving sisters. This is the way the sisters argue. It just is. Rhaenyra then essentially force feeds her, which is not great. This was horrific to watch. It is horrific to watch anybody who's on a deliberate hunger strike be force fed. I've seen this a few times. It's traumatic every time. I felt so bad for Helaena. And once again, after just posing this question of like, well, do you think that like just staying alive is a good quality of life? For her to be force fed in this traumatic way, once again, is adding to the weight of the philosophy of the question, which is like, no, she's not living a fulfilling life. She's not living a good life. And this is just a part of it, that Helaena has such little agency that even something as personal as whether or not she wants to eat can't even be left to her own hands, has to be taken upon and responded with in violence and aggression. But let's go over to Harrenhal. Aemon is alive. He's being nursed back to health by Alicent again. Alicent has a banger of a line where she says, you've realized you're alone in this world and that we are together. I rewound that line like 5 times. I was like, that is a fucking banger. We also get a major backstory lore here. So Alicent is essentially saying that she was Lady Whore, Harrenhal's wife. She was alive during Aegon the Conqueror's quest. And so here's what we know from different books and such. Harren had 4 sons. 2 were killed in battle against Aegon, and 2 died with him in the tower at Harrenhal. Alicent is seemingly claiming that there was a 5th child, unnamed, in the history books, who was burned in the fire. And she called all the maesters and healers to help her son. None of it worked. And so she turned to the magic of the Weirwoods, all of this old magic that is surrounding the Riverlands and Harrenhal, in order to help heal him. He still died. The son still died. But as they say in Once Upon a Time, or any other show that gives us any sort of magical lore, like Into the Woods or whatever, all magic comes with a price. Most stories about magic are about the price of magic. At least good ones are. And so like in Once Upon a Time, Rumpelstiltskin used to say this all the time. He'd be like, magic comes with a price. For Alicent, the price was this experience of immortality, a stripping of her titles, an eviction from her home in the way that she knew it, and then being forced to stay at Harrenhal and serve whoever comes to rule it. So big yikes on bikes. And then Aegon shows up, which is perhaps Aemon's biggest hope and worst nightmare come to fruition when Sunfire and Aegon just pull up to Harrenhal and slap the shit out of him and delivers the best line, "I'm alive." I thought that was fucking hysterical. I'm really compelled by Aemon as a character. I think he's a highly dislikable character through season 1 and season 2, and yet I find him to be a really compelling character in the journey that he's gone on in this particular season. And so when he has this moment here and he's on his knees and he's essentially like, I've changed, brother. I have realized things about myself. I've realized that I coveted what you had. And like is honest and vulnerable. And I find the performance and the sentiment of it all quite moving as far as storytelling goes. I'm not sure if we're supposed to have such a deep affinity for Aemond, but I thought the way that he delivered this to Aegon, this confession, and also in the same breath, the way that he makes a very deep claim for Alice here by being like, "That's my betrothed." She was like, "Am I now?" Okay. I thought that this was a really great scene. I thought Aegon's own frustration about everything that's happened, the way that he is trying to bring Aemon to heel, the way that he's like, "You're going to get on Sunfire. We're going to get the fuck out of here. We're going to go find Vhagar, and we're making a march for King's Landing." And so that's where we leave them sort of at Harrenhal. But I thought this was a really great scene and a really good lore dump, especially with all of the Alice stuff. That brings us to the Sept. Not great for Rhaenyra. Not great here. Her god complex is hitting really hard. She has the High Septon killed. Not a good look. Once again, a banger of a line where the High Septon says, "You may have 6 dragons, but I have a 7-faced god." What a fucking wild line to die on. But I wish the High Septon would just say, like, "I'm a misogynist. I don't want to see you rule because you have a vagina," which is something he's clearly never seen. And instead, Rhaenyra bolsters up Alan by stroking his ego. She's like, "Hey, you have the blood of old Valyria running through your veins, baby," and spurs him on to kill the High Septon, which is like fucking huge deal in Westeros. Pretty big fucking deal to have such little reverence for the proclaimed religion of Westeros, and you have like their head person, their pope, essentially killed. So pretty ominous, pretty dark. Now I will say her outfit was fucking sick. Her outfit, the makeup, all of it really fucking awesome. She looked super androgynous or masculine. Like I think that that's obviously the point, but there's something like deeply menacing about the way that she looks. She goes out, she makes a speech, she's trying to bargain on her moral, ethical, emotional rule in Westeros to the small folk. And I always think about this line again from A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, where they say, like, "I've never known a joust to change the price of eggs," which is true. Like, the small folk don't really care about all of this shit that's happening. They just want to know that their basic needs are going to be met. Instead, Rhaenyra comes out from killing the High Septon, stands in this position of power over all of these people, giving this speech. It's supposed to feel fascistic, which it does, in which she's trying to plead with the small folk about why it is so critical and important that she rules. And so she tells them about the prophecy. She tells them that winter is coming. And then she speaks in High Valyrian, a language that they don't understand, and says, "I am the prince that was promised," in the way that she is denouncing her gender and almost being like, "Okay, if it's a prince that you want, it's a prince that you'll get. I am the prince that was promised," but literally tells everyone about the prophecy. No one knows what she's fucking talking about. No one cares. I don't know if people don't care, but I'm going to say that most people don't care. They care about the things that they care about. They want to know that they've got money. They want to know that they're safe. They want to know that their city is secure. They want to know they're not going to die by dragon fire. They want to know that they're going to be able to eat tonight. And Rhaenyra can't guarantee any of those things. And not only can she not do that, but she's telling them about this prophecy about winter that, isn't really going to be relevant to people until winter hits. And again, is this fuel for conversation about the Targaryen madness. Like, what the fuck is she saying? Who cares about this? Like the way that people will gossip about this and spread this is driven again from this. I mean, we don't know, but presumably from this misogynistic place of like, did you see how crazy that woman was up there talking about this nonsense stuff that we don't care? It is my guess of what's some of what we're going to experience in season 4. And that brings us to the battle proper. Ormond, sick fuck, children on the front line. We've got the battle that starts, and then pretty much right away, as soon as they breach the wall, the Winter Wolves breached the southern wall, we've got a little kid who's forced to be on the front lines, taps Roddy on like the back of his leg, and Roddy takes his axe to that kid's face. Pretty tough. I mean, we're watching some of the most graphic, maybe not the most graphic violence that we've ever seen on Game of Thrones, but we're watching stuff that's like meant to provoke us to feel something bad about these people. And in particular for like the Winter Wolves, who are not the Starks, but that are supposed to remind us of them, and who like we've been introduced to the Winter Wolves through the Starks. To watch these Winter Wolves who are associated then with a house that we associate from watching Game of Thrones with integrity, take an axe to a child's face who really wasn't a threat to you and you didn't need to do that, is, I think, kind of the point. These men are so battle hungry. Roddy, Daemon, Kristen Cole, right? Like Ormond. These men are so bloodthirsty. And it says something when we watch these characters that we are potentially supposed to be endeared to do some really horrible shit that we don't like. And so we've got Roddy taking, the axe to the kid's face. And then like right after, not gonna lie, Daddy Daemon giving a Dracarys to 2 kids. Also not great. And he's yelling at the kids to get out of the way. And there's 2 kids that stand sort of defiant, and then they're like scurrying off to the side, but it's unclear to us, whether they live or die. And that's not really the point. The point is that we see this look of conflict on Daemon's face where he doesn't want to burn a bunch of children, innocent children, alive, but comes to the conclusion that he will because he's got to get through. I will also say that like Caraxie's face coming through the fire and the door and stuff like that, fucking sick shot. That was some really cool CGI work. It was really giving Jack Torrance and The Shining vibes. There's like the little meme of his face through the door. He's like, I'm back. Shout out to Caraxie's. Anyway, Gwaine is baby girl who goes to Darren, who is attempting to release Tessarion to go be a part of this fight. Feels like it's a part of his duty to go and do this. And Gwaine is like, I fought beside other brave men who believed that death was the only path to glory. Do not die for Ormond's vanity. But, in Ormond raising Darren up as king or king to be, puts this weight on Darren's shoulders about what kind of ruler he has to think himself of. Darren then has to bear the weight of the responsibility of the people that are fighting in his name, essentially. And so, like, I think he takes this very seriously, and I appreciate him for that. We then have this, like, fight between Roxton and Daemon. Daemon gets fucked up. I think it's the first time throughout the whole course of the show that we've really seen Daemon lose a fight, a truly skilled warrior. And yet he's in this position where he is not doing well, only for Ulf to come through with Silverwing and fuck everybody up. So it's the first time that not only is he really, truly hurt from person-to-person combat, but then because of that is put in a position where he is experiencing dragon warfare from the bottom and not from atop a dragon. which is a really interesting place for him to be because he's unconscious. And when he sort of comes to, what we see are children and mothers holding mangled bodies of children and people who had nothing to do with this, women and children, essentially. These people that we as knights are sworn to protect are the people who are paying the price for us to have this battle. And you can see on his face that this is traumatizing for him to be in this position because the way that Daemon gets up and fights next, we've got the ears sort of ringing, everything sort of tuned out. It's like very tunnel vision. He almost goes and hurts Corlys because he's in this fight or flight PTSD experience. And then Corlys is like, we're getting the fuck out of here. But you can see that Daemon is not thinking clearly as he's witnessing and experiencing, the true horror and devastation of dragon warfare from the ground. And that kind of brings us to Ulf, who has had enough of everyone's shit. Big diversion from the book in which Ulf just sort of betrays Team Black. It sort of seems that Ulf is really just sick of everyone's shit. And so he pulls a Mad King, or a Dany perhaps, and just fucks up both sides. He just Dracarys's over all of Tumbleton. So I loved this quote from James, who plays Ormond, in the after the episode where he says, the whole battle spins on a dime, all because one man felt embarrassed. The power of shame. It's amazing. You can have all these huge, big armies, big set pieces, and the things which really dictates the story is something so small and domestic. And this is obviously calling back to what has led Ulf into the arms of Ormond to begin with, which is the fact that Daemon embarrassed him by slapping him in the street. And this Targaryen supremacy that exists within the Blacks, despite the fact that Ulf is a dragon rider and possesses a dragon. And so the way that, Daemon and Rhaenyra feel that Ulf is somebody who owes them something that is their possession, on top of the fact that they're not getting paid and she won't let him go to town and drink and all of these other things, right, is what pushes him to Ormond. And then for Ormond to slap the shit out of him worse, I think, than Daemon does. He slaps the shit out of him. He fucks him up. And he's like, get on your dragon and get out there and do what you were fucking told to do. None of these people actually really respect him. And so he's like, fuck you too. And takes out Ormond intentionally, which I thought was great. Ormond's end was phenomenal. Prior to Ulf and Silverwing taking him out, Ormond cuts off Roddy's arm. He nearly throws up when he cuts the arm off. The blood starts to spew on his face and gets in his mouth. He's gagging. Can't handle it. This is coming right after the fact that he's just had to find Ulf in the bathroom. Not great. Roddy, with his other good arm, takes his sword, shoves it up his ass, is like, this is a proper fucking from the north, and then spreads his arm out, Jesus Christ style, to welcome the dragon fire and meet his end as he's come to die for the Dragon Queen. So, there's that. Men being men, just like the most masculine ending for both of these characters. Fine. And again, we continue to see throughout the entirety of this fight, mothers holding their dead children, children dead, all of these burned bodies all over the place, and the recognition that the Blacks have really lost the moral high ground and the fear of what it would be if they burned Tumbleton, this town that raised their banner for Rhaenyra, what that would look like if they lost, the moral high ground on that battle in that place is exactly what has happened. It's Rhaenyra's worst fear. And so that's sort of like the overarching experience of Tumbleton. And then we have these sort of like smaller, intimate moments with characters in the aftermath. So we have Gwaine seeking out Darren. We don't know where Darren is. We have Hugh seeking out Kat, who is dead. And we just see the emotional and physical devastation, only for that to be mirrored in King's Landing with Helena's death, jumping from the window, landing on the spikes, or seemingly jumping from the window, landing on the spikes. Alicent then sees all of the butterflies and knows that something is amiss. The blue butterflies being the same color as Helena's dress. Not that Alicent knows that, but this intuitive, instinctual feeling that you can see playing across Alicent's face. And then finally, Rhaenyra looking at the tapestry. She sees that her sister, who was a Targaryen dreamer, who has not only dreamed of her own death, but right before that, we see this image of Rhaenyra in the chainmail and all of the stuff that she's wearing with blood, with fire, dragons behind her, and, you know, this really pretty unflattering picture of Rhaenyra, right? All the things that you care about are ugly. And this is when then Rhaenyra closes the window and sort of committing fully to this new era of her reign, this fearful era of her reign. And so that brings us to our burn book. Let us crack it open. Let's see what the superlatives are for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. This is strictly for the Femme and the Furious. It goes to the quote or the moment that relays the most feminine rage. And it goes to Rhaenyra, who says, "Once Ormond and Darren are dead, I will sniff out Aegon's false heart and kill him myself." As she's saying this, the music in the background is this like sort of war drums, soft war drums. It is so ominous, but it was really amazing. I was like really captivated by this entire scene. The Shiro Award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring or the moment that is the most empowering. And of course, it goes to Helaena, who's like, "You are ugly. Everything that you care about, ugly." The Femme Fatale Award, you know, for the most smash the patriarchy moment of the episode. And it goes to Ulf, who's like, "Fuck you too. Fuck both sides. Fuck you guys and fuck you too." I thought that was a really good moment. Speak Your Truth trophy. Best quote or a line. I have a few. I thought Helena's line where she says, "Do you think life is nothing more than not being dead?" is such a good line. But I also really fucking loved this "I'm alive" by Aegon is really funny. But also then right after that, he's like, "You kinslayer, you usurper, you cunt." It was really good. Just everything that Aegon did this episode, 12 out of 10. Just perfect. And then honorary heartthrob, because I'm just a girl, okay? And I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments. And of course it is going to Daddy Daemon, who said, "It would be my pleasure, Your Grace. It would be my pleasure to go to Tumbleton and fuck everybody up." The way that that exchange happened between the two of them was so sexually charged. I was finding myself sweating. That is our episode. Shout out to House of the Dragon. We've done it. We will see you in 2 years when House of the Dragon returns for its final season. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Friday, we'll be back tomorrow with Glow of the Everflame. And then I'll be back on Sunday with a Fast 5 episode. I love you all. And until then, don't jump out a window.